Hi everyone, and welcome to the weekly predictions based on astrology for the week of March 2nd, 2020. First, let's do a quick recap of the predictions for the previous week. In terms of the stock market direction, I definitely missed a large drop on Monday and Tuesday. In fact, I thought that there was about 55% chance of market going up, and while the background influence is pretty intense, and it will continue to remain so throughout mid-April. And I actually didn't think that the particular week things would be quite as bad just yet. I did predict that the market would then go down on Wednesday, and Thursday my prediction was down, and the market ended up being sort of mixed. And on Friday I thought the market again had a slight probability of going up, and I guess Nasdaq was up 0.01%, but then Dow Jones went down. As far as predictions for Monday, and I'm recording this on the 2nd of March already, and I did post my predictions on my blog the day before at tolstonka.com. Again, I thought actually that the market would continue to go down on the 2nd of March, and it did bounce fairly significantly, around 5% each Nasdaq and Dow Jones. So I did see that there would be an important day in terms of large size moves, but the prediction for Monday yet again was incorrect. In terms of other predictions that I made, this has to do with this ongoing background influence, which is still going to be in effect through the end of this year, which is the Saturn-Pluto conjunction in Capricorn, which typically corresponds to things like increased major earthquakes, various disasters, or shuffling at the top, for large corporations, or changes in leadership, where we have leaders who are in power for a long time basically stepping down, passing away, or being violently removed, etc. So for this last week, I didn't see any particular major earthquakes like 6.0 and higher, or any noteworthy major volcanic eruptions. That said, we have this influence where things will become more and more intense towards the end of March, especially through early April, and I definitely expect that this seismic activity will pick up. And we did have some news about important leaders basically passing away or stepping down. Even today, as March 2nd, we had news that the GE CEO Jack Welch passed away at 84, and MSNBC host Chris Matthews, that's been, I guess, the host of this program Hardball, which I don't ever watch, but apparently he was hosting it for 20 years, and suddenly I guess he stepped down for whatever reason. But speaking of last week, we had quite a few leaders either moving on or basically passing away. In particular, on the 25th of February, we had several announcements. We had Disney CEO Bob Iger stepping down. Then the former Egyptian president Hosni Mubarak, who ruled until Arab Spring, died at 91. We had Salesforce CEO Keith Block stepping down. MasterCard CEO Ajay Banga stepped down, or Banga, I don't know. And then on the 24th of February, shale pioneer Mark Papa had announced his retirement. In other news for last week, I made predictions of there being, particularly in the US, increased focus on important lawsuits or judges or legal areas, international trade, immigration, long-distance transportation, and that we might hear about some either aggressive or risky moves, or some important legal decisions or agreements that may be seen as over the top or involve either prominent cases or laws or judges, or prominent person being sued over some, perhaps like an accident, high collision. I didn't necessarily see that, any accidents involving prominent people. At the same time, there was news on the 23rd of February about Weinstein being found guilty of, some sexual assault, rape, or something like that. But then that obviously had occurred already before I posted my blog, so it wasn't necessarily a prediction as far as like I think I may have already seen this, but I don't know that I've seen any other prominent case. I guess it was Roger Stone case, fairly prominent, but it's again on the US level. But I didn't see anything else besides that. So another prediction that I made was that 25, 26 of February would be busy news days with news about communication and transportation companies, cars, retail sales agreements, and any sort of negotiations. And for US, I was expecting that there would be, and it's actually starting in February, but continuing through, the entire year and even into next year. But in particular, I guess, strong February 14th through July 7th, and then in November through December, a period where we may hear more about large corporations experiencing some perhaps issues, that may lead them to bankruptcy, or some problems with taxes, concerns about loans, rates, I guess, availability of sort of the funds, or borrowing too much, or their investments, or being hacked, or basically dealing with something that is a hidden or matter, or that's some sort of a secret, basically. And there was an announcement that the, if I'm pronouncing correctly, Rod had proposed a 1.6 billion opioid deal and Chapter 11, I guess, bankruptcy for its generics unit. So basically, on the 24th, there was this announcement that they're finalizing a proposal to basically place its U.S. generic drug business into bankruptcy, to a debt maturities and liabilities that had arisen out of the opioid crisis. So I would say this is a good manifestation of the trends that I was seeing again, and I believe through the end of this year, both in the US and globally, but the US has its own signature in addition to global signature, which kind of makes things even more prominent, to specifically see some changes where we have large established corporations either having issues with, again, bankruptcy or taxes or anything to do with like loans, rates, investments that go wrong, or again, liabilities are too high, and it may have to do with, just like we saw with Boy Scouts, it may have to do with all these plutonian kind of topics, which is again death in itself, but also either some illegal behavior or secretive behavior, like I said, spying and hacking, where secrets come out, or some scandals, or in this case, it's this addiction, basically, or addictive, drugs, so things that are not necessarily, I guess, pleasant to think about, or are seen somehow as dirty, and involving some secretive activities. And so these may come up again. It may have to do with leaders of such companies, or just the nature of the company itself. So maybe, say, recycling business, right, or trash collection, or removing things that have, decayed or stored underground. Again, this may be necessarily a bad business by itself, or it could be a business that is cooking its books or something along those lines. And this is just one such manifestation, but we will probably hear throughout the year, and in particular February through July, early July, and then mid-November to mid-December in this year would be sort of peak times for US, where we may hear more about companies undergoing such, I guess, difficult times. I also made a prediction for February 27th through 28th that there would be increased focus that's globally on finance, debt, loans, earnings, taxes, insurance, and that there may be some news about the aggressive or risky moves by the governments, like some sort of financial intervention, or that there may be an announcement about a new financial project that somehow challenges the status quo, and the emphasis might be on like a quick money transfers, debt collection, or perhaps some financial, I guess, approach, or something that's focused on escaping governmental regulations or oversight that, is offering, independence, financial independence from established financial institutions. So the news that I think would fit, I guess, such a manifestation that I saw were on the 28th of February, there was an announcement that ex-Barclays bankers were cleared in the over the 2008 Qatar fees, and so apparently this was a blow to UK fraud office, as the headline says. But we do have this combination of the influences that again indicate involvement in some sort of fraudulent activities, financial fraud potentially, and that this may have been as unexpected news, and somehow again these particular individuals were able to sort of basically, I wouldn't say escape governmental regulations, but at least they were not being held responsible in this particular case. And on the 27th of February, there was also news that SEC ordered Wells Fargo to pay $35 million for them making recommendations of high-risk products to, I guess, their users. So again, we have this aggressive kind of financial move, financial regulation, and in this case it's not a bankruptcy, it's just a fee and fine that was needed to be paid. I also made a prediction about February 25th, 26th being busy news days, again with focus on like media, communication, transportation, in particular like cars, retail sales agreements, and the negotiation would be proceeding relatively fast. And the agreements may be reached, particularly related to areas like oil, chemicals, healthcare, beverages, movies, religion, etc. What I did see were multiple announcements by various airlines that basically they're limiting travel either to China or to Italy. I guess Italy may have been this week. But basically some limitations on international travel again. So this would have to do obviously with the transportation and healthcare, but then again, this would not be, you wouldn't need, to know much to make this prediction just based on the news about coronavirus. At the same time, there was also an announcement on the 26th of February by Toyota that they basically said that the Japan plants may be affected by the this epidemic-related supply issues. Again, nothing I would say that would have been difficult to predict, but specifically we had news that related to like car manufacturers, and again, at the same time, healthcare. I didn't hear about any sort of announcements about agreements reached between, I'll say, chemical or healthcare-related companies. At the same time, there was news on the 26th of February that Bayer chairman quit as Roundup settlement talked. We're progressing. So the Bayer chairman, who was one of the architects of the $63 billion takeover deal, that basically where Bayer, I guess, acquired Monsanto, and now currently they're undergoing these costly lawsuits due to, I guess, related to Roundup and glyphosate. And so this person, I guess, I'm guessing they were being held responsible, or they hold themselves responsible. And this person, Werner Wenning, had stepped down or announced that they will step down in April. So like I said, no like agreements per se, but we do have these, we did have news about negotiations and specifically again reached, specifically related to chemicals and healthcare, because again, the lawsuits are about glyphosate, I guess, potentially causing, or maybe it's supposed proven, I don't know, causing cancer. So let's see. And there was also news also related to car gas manufacturers that about the merger between Peugeot and Fiat. So I guess in this case it was news about exactly what I predicted: car manufacturers or car related companies, and holding negotiations and some sort of an agreement. And the companies, they did previously, I guess, struck deal in December, But last week there was news about them announcing a record high, I guess, profitability. So again, it's just so what I was predicting, the type of news, we did see those kind of type of news being announced. Let's see, and moving on to this week, as I said, I'm recording it on the 2nd. As a very, high level sort of summary, I do think that overall this will be a down week. In fact, I made prediction for market being down every day of the week with like different percentages, probability for each day. And also that overall, overarching theme will be focused on finance, banks, financial institutions, and governmental regulation, either of the financial institutions or sort of a financial intervention, which again is not necessarily something that one would not predict just based on the effect, of coronavirus on, like, say, manufacturers and economy. But that's also something that I specifically see in the global chart as well as in the chart of the US. And already today I did see on Monday, the 2nd of March, there was an announcement that top central banks, and particularly the top 3 world central banks, being, of course, US Federal Reserve, but also the European Central Bank and Bank of Japan, on Monday the 2nd, they came up and they issued some emergency statements, and they're ready to step in and help as needed. And that on Tuesday, G7 finance ministers and central bank governors will hold a conference call to discuss various measures, basically, on how to deal with economic impact of the coronavirus outbreak. So then, to cover this in more detail, as I said, there's this ongoing background influence, which is just typically coincides with various strong geopolitical changes, such as, countries falling apart or various, new partnerships forming between various countries, large corporations, basically, again, changing, or restructuring, the leadership being restructured, reshuffling of the governments, and we see a lot of that with, like, Brexit, for example. Even Russia, they're announcing some constitutional changes, etc. This was, of course, not this week, but that's an ongoing background influence, and we see more of that now, starting, late February through, I'd say, mid-April, and getting more and more intense towards the end of March. We definitely have this intensifying influence where we may see, more earthquakes getting, seismic activity getting stronger and stronger, and again, more accidents, some sort of disasters, things that are like shaking things, literally either explosions or collapse of some buildings, or collapse at some top leadership, let's say corporations. Again, more people who are empowered and suddenly they lose that power, or they themselves decide to step down. Again, somebody who was like this Chris Matthews in, hosting a show for 20 years, or somebody who's really old, but it was a known powerful leader for a long time. So more and more of such announcements may come, and as I said, basically this entire year I see on and off themes of basically finance and some sort of either, again, bankruptcies, not just in the US, but also globally, or restructuring, reorganizing, related to, say, loans, investments, and borrowed money. Basically, I guess could be the rates, how exactly money is distributed, and what I guess is and not necessarily physical money, but basically what is the value of various investments, and who is, I guess, in charge of deciding what the value is, or who is sort of in charge of controlling and putting some restrictions on it, on the movement perhaps of finance or something like that. And again, a lot of this has to do with either large corporations or governments, and there's some restructuring, some changes. So again, we may hear about leaders of corporations stepping down, again, be it because of the scandal, be it because there's some fraud going on, or perhaps just because there is, again, some liabilities that they can't handle, or like in case of, I guess, the Bear leader, I forget if it was CEO or this wedding, where I guess the person was perhaps seen as responsible for, some troubles the company is going through. So all of that is picking up and it's going to be on throughout this year, but in particular, sort of at this period, we will have this be quite intense throughout, say, mid-April, and sort of with one theme of it being focused on especially governmental regulations, various taxes, tariffs, embargoes, shortages, delays, or building or reorganizing some structures. So this could be, again, leadership of some governments, officials, or it could be projects that involve large structures. So maybe some, say, like a dam or tunnel or bridge, or as we saw in like Wuhan, I guess, really large hospital or something that's like on a massive scale. And this could be that suddenly, a project like that, it begins to build something really large, or a new set of plants is built to specifically, around, I guess, certain area to, erect such a structure, or vice versa. These structures, like, we had Notre Dame or something that's like a famous old building, is like I said, this long-standing, maybe a leader goes away, we may have these either long-standing business or plant or object that is basically either, say, is devastated by an earthquake, or being dismantled, or completely refinished, or something that's like on a large scale that takes a long time, and then again is either well known or then remains in the place for a long time. So at the same time, we may also hear about more and more, again, especially towards the end of March, increase in various sort of violent activities. It could be literally attacks, explosions, fires, anti-governmental protests, or attacks on leaders, perhaps, or it could be something like just shootings, just people becoming extra angry and just feeling sort of unsettled, having that unsettled energy. Also increased news about corruption, especially governmental corruption, various scandals, like I said, involving government, corporate officials, or just really famous people, but people who, again, are rigid, possibly male, older, or just people, maybe they're young, but they're just mentally very like rigid. And as I said, it could be just a variety of attacks, and it kind of be around the buildings that are, again, corporate, tall buildings, old buildings, or involving literally governmental or corporate offices. And that's on and off throughout the year, but especially between now and, let's say, mid-April, peaking late March, early April. Another background influence that's sort of in place for the US, and as I mentioned, this will be on through pretty much through the end of 2020 and into even 2021. But this will be, again, increased news about various corporations where there may be spying, hacking, some sort of illegal activities, maybe financial fraud, problems with like taxes, or again, some scandals, or just something that, or maybe no scandals, but something that the company itself may be involved in. It would be like maybe trash, recycling, nuclear power, or underground locations may be involved, again, like a coal or mining company. And these companies may particularly experience some difficulties where, again, with finance, with taxes, or with scandals, some corporate problems, or maybe they're accused of pollution, specifically pollution of like farmlands, or something that may affect reproductive capabilities or women and children. Just like with Boy Scouts, they're accused of, not accused of, but there are a lot of lawsuits pending involving like abuse of these young children, and so bankruptcy was filed to potentially avoid having to deal with this many cases. So that same pattern of sort of one or another variation may kind of continue, and we may hear more and more about more and more of such cases. And in particular, there may be this week important announcements may come on March 2nd or 3rd. And I guess there was already an announcement about this company, about the, what is it? I forgot the name of it. The healthcare company or pharmaceutical company, where they basically want to file bankruptcy for their generic drug, department. Let's see, for China and coronavirus, I see that this will be multiple, at least that's what it shows in China's chart, that there will be multiple waves of potentially of the outbreak, and or where issues related to healthcare, pharmaceuticals, pollution, as well as, of course, chemicals, gas, oil, etc., may become kind of more prominent. These will continue on and off. And like I said, there will be multiple waves, in particularly March, July, and then October, November, with, I'd say, November 9th and 13th being the most kind of significant dates. And in general, I'd say, even though now, I guess as of today at least, there were some reports that the number of new cases in China were slowing down, I see that August through November 2020 may be even more significant time for the areas related to sort of healthcare and chemicals, pollution, and or some sort of secrets and secret hidden places, or just places of isolation, such as like hospitals or prisons, for example. So all of those kind of news, I think, will still intensify, and the resolution, or sort of the final kind of turn, stepping out of the woods and kind of having this be sort of completely taken care of, or at least, I don't know if the cure is found or some sort of full containment is achieved. I don't think it will happen until, I'd say, late November of this year. So as I said, Monday, I thought the market would go down. I gave it about 60 to 65% chance, but it actually went up today, so recovered somewhat, for the drop in the previous week. At the same time, I also made predictions about focus globally being on financial institutions, decreased earnings, as well as concerns about like cash availability, and sort of concerns about like whether expenditures are done, on things that actually, worth their value, and or potentially concerns about expenses on things like related to sports, military, weapons, or fighting fires. As of today, I haven't seen news specifically about sports, military, weapons, and fighting fires, whether or not there are some earnings or problems about, related to, say, expenditures in these areas. However, yes, we do have obviously announcement from these, about this G7 financial ministers meeting, and I guess you would say that yes, they're kind of fighting fires, or they're looking to come up with some emergency measures, financial measures that help to deal, or I guess offset the impact from the coronavirus economical impact. And in US for Monday, it is also a day where we may hear sort of more news about banks, financial institutions, as well as anything that to do with like sort of financial risk or gambling. And of course, we had this wild swing from major drop to, I guess, major up. So I'd say it's almost like a casino and gambling kind of a sort of vibe indeed. And at the same time, there may also be sort of concern, and I guess it's valid, whether or not the value sort of is inflated, especially of organizations or businesses related to, again, bank and finance, whether or not, their products are up due to some speculation, or they actually have that value. Tuesday, Wednesday, slight percent chance that the market will go down. Thursday, also about 55% chance of it going down, so not a very strong chance, but for me, generally things don't look very cheery. On Thursday, there may be again increased globally focus on banks, financial institutions, profits, assets, banks, savings, real estate, farming, food industry, and security. So, like I said, all week we may see focus on sort of finance and banks and I guess loans rates, But on Thursday, the focus may have to do again with more like assets such as, real estate, or impact on food industry or farmers, and the protection, I guess, of even population, be it physical security, perhaps intensification of some sort of, I guess, military activities may kind of bring those concerns about, or it could be because, again, there may be some food shortages or concerns about like basic needs basically being satisfied. So there may be sort of news about corporations or governments kind of coming up with some measures to deal with either shortages, say shortage of food, or to ensure security of the population. And so there may be some announcements that these, like I said, large corporations or governments are stepping up to address either shortages or needs of the population in those areas. And in particular, there may be concerns that not enough is being done to ensure safety, security, or stability. Say concerns about stability of the banks or food supply, or literally protection, especially for like children and mothers and families. And finally, I think Friday has about 60% chance of the market going down. With this background influence being pretty strong, I only expect, things to kind of get, I would say, worse as far as the concerns about economic stability towards especially the end of March through early April. And in particular, as far as financial kind of, I guess, news are concerned, I see that on March 8th, which is Sunday, through 9th, which is Monday, the following week, there may be some surprising or sudden developments related to specifically banking, finance, forex, and the news may be, again, related to either volatility or some surprising or sudden announcement is made, perhaps some sort of financial intervention. There may also be increased news about like oil, pharmaceuticals, gas, healthcare, of course, coronavirus, fits right in with that, as well as beverages, pollution of water, for example, navy, ships, etc. So we may also hear about the excessively wet weather at the same time, or flooding, or something to do with like, if say, cruise ships, I guess, fall into this. We have water, we have ships, and also spread of diseases either through fluids or because of, moist weather. And at the same time, I think the market may fluctuate more than usual. I would guess 9th may be a down day, and or there may be again just a major fluctuation and accompanied by perhaps fluctuations or perhaps a drop in oil prices, as well as some most likely Euro USD changes, like greater than usual in the value of US dollar. And then also, as I said, March, I would say, especially from March like 21st through April 3rd, but more or less from late February through early April, it is a really important time period because we'll have like 4 planets kind of combining all in one area, and all kinds of interesting things may basically occur at that time, starting from like major earthquakes, mudslides, volcano eruptions, building collapses, accidents, especially involving anything to do with stone, like buildings, tunnels, anything that you would expect to be standing there, or if it was a really old building, that this is the time where there may be some tensions that cause it to, say, collapse. Also, various like governmental protests, fires, and various disasters, especially involving like underground locations, toll locations, sort of rocky terrain, mountains, nuclear power plants, recycling plants, terrorism, violence, cyber attacks, as well as airspace, electricity, power supply, IT, telecom, and networks. Why so many areas? Because again, there's so many planets kind of conjuncting together, and each of them has its own signature. So when they combine together, you can have multiple things sort of go wrong. Maybe an earthquake that leads to some sort of important, like power station collapsing. So you have the explosion, you lose electricity, and you have large objects made of like stone and metal collapsing on themselves. and then of course governmental authority of some sort needs to come and repair it. And also there may be increased geopolitical tensions, and including military threats, various sort of posturing or attacks, or just focus on weapons, perhaps major weapons deals. And these, in fact, may also be related to developments from June 2019, which, for example, US-Iran tensions, or developments from late October through early November of 2019. So again, this could be US-Iran, US-China tensions, or of course anything else. But it may involve, again, like I said, posturing between various countries, and or basically major events that lead to one country, say, being broken up into pieces, or countries that perhaps were different entities combining together, not combining together, but coming together to join some sort of a new union or new partnership. And all of those kind of situations may be accompanied by either overt military tensions, as well as like covert, secretive operations. So a lot of spying, hacking, or maybe secret removal of some, leaders, or cyber attacks. Especially cyber attacks are the increase of probability of such is especially high on March 22nd, and those kind of these initial attacks may be followed by various either attacks or problems that now involving airplanes, drones, or space-related objects with things that are flying. So maybe it starts with some sort of cyber attack or some devious kind of activity or manipulation or threats or even financial threats. And then it kind of grows into more of like aerial attack of some sort, for example. And then there may also be potentially problems at the same time with like network grids, power grids. This could be due to, say, high winds, and maybe just a power station, blows up just because there is a bad weather. And or it could be like a cyber attack, and then it affects, say, sort of power grid. And that again is, high probability of this is about the end of March 2020. And at the same time, as I already mentioned, there's high probability of, at the very minimum, just important folks on the top of various corporations or governments just stepping down. Maybe they're just tired and they want to take it easy, or they're violently removed, or they even may announce that they're perhaps sick, even something like cancer, or something that's like really is difficult to, I guess, or perhaps there's a secretive illness that they have. They're not even going to say what it is, but they may just step down because of that. So definitely a very tense period, probably one of the more tense periods this year. But as I said, even continuing onward, whatever the changes that occur about this time, from end of February into early April, we will continue hearing sort of reverberations of those for months to come. And it would just maybe like a follow-up on these events, or something where event occurs and then reevaluation needs to happen, and then maybe there's an ultimatum, and then a few weeks later something else happen as a response. So definitely I would pay attention to what happens between now, let's say, and mid-April, because following events throughout the year most likely will be related to these events and will be somehow continuation of what is going to unfold in the next few weeks. So definitely an interesting time, to say the least, and I hope you are staying safe and just kind of taking it in without personally being affected, and that you have time to comment and check out this video and follow me again next week. Until then, catch you guys later. Have a great week. Bye.